Hi, I'm State Representative Jane Garibay, representing Windsor and Windsor Locks, and welcome to On the Porch. Although I wish we really were on the porch today with good weather, but we're inside with the snow. And I'm very excited to have Representative Jillian Gilchrest from West Hartford with us today. Hi, Jillian.
Hi, Jane. Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you too. Today we're going to talk about sexual assault, just plain and basic. And Jillian, Representative Gilchrest has a lot of experience and knowledge in this area. So we've asked her on today to answer lots of questions. Do you want to say a little bit first, Jillian?
Sure. So my background is I came to the issue of preventing and addressing sexual assault in college. I began volunteering as a sexual assault crisis counselor at the Sexual Assault Crisis Center of Eastern Connecticut, so out in Willimantic, Connecticut. And then my first job out of college was as the child advocate at that crisis center. And so I counseled children who had been sexually abused. Since then, that work actually led me to be interested in policy work. I've worked as the policy director at the Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and I currently chair the Trafficking in Persons Council, which, while not sexual assault directly, has a sexual assault component to the crime, and have done quite a bit of policy work on the issue.
Right. So, I think there is more sexual assault than people think. And that's the first question. And, I know that sometimes women don't come forward, or men, or a little boy, a sexual assault victim does not come forward right away. And it can take years. It could be lifetimes to come forward. Do you have, and why does that happen?
Sure. So that happens for a variety of reasons. It depends on who the individual is that assaulted the person. So if it is a family member or a close friend, there might be confusion that what took place is sexual assault. There might be fear or not wanting to get that individual in trouble. Oftentimes with childhood sexual abuse, the individual that's being abused loves their offender, and so they don't want that person to get in trouble. The confusion comes in when you've heard about sexual assault and the experience you have doesn't fit that definition of maybe a stranger jumping out of the woods. And so that's why it can take years to recognize that what took place was actually sexual assault. Other reasons for not coming forward, oftentimes victims aren't believed, and the criminal justice process can be very trying. And oftentimes in a case like sexual assault, it really is a he said, she said, or the only people present are the two. And so it's hard to have evidence. And so people don't want to be invalidated in the experience they had through the criminal justice system. So all of those components coming together, we see that this is one of the most underreported crimes.
Right. So, until recently, I thought we had gotten a lot better with that and listening, but it's not necessarily always true, is it?
No, I think we have come farther than we've ever been in our cultural understanding of sexual assault, but still the policies in place can place some barriers in the way. And even though we've come a long way in our cultural understanding, there's still a lot of individuals who hold on to old thoughts regarding sexual assault.
Right. And I have to say, I love Law and Order, the sex crimes unit with Liv.
Yep.
But I knew of an incident, and our officers do a great job, but they're not always trained. They're not Liv going to the house to talk to the victim, right?
Yep.
And so once a police officer goes to the door, many times people will deny it. They'll say that they don't want to press charges because of that whole public, disbelief, shaming, etc. Isn't that true?
Yes, certainly. I think there can also be a fear that in some way they might get in trouble. There's been such a narrative that individuals lie about this crime, which is just not true. It's the same rate as any other crime, which is extremely low. But I think that can be a barrier too, that in some way they might get in trouble.
Well, and it's like if you get into an accident or different other incidences, it's not like this where they said, well, what was she wearing? Why did she go to a bar? Really? Would we ask a guy the same thing? Why did he go to a bar? Um, so what progress have we made in that area, if any?
So we've done quite a bit of work policy-wise in the state with regards to campus sexual assault. So I'd
Yeah.
say that's where we've made the most progress, not only in changing policies to better understand that consent is the crux of this crime, but also in terms of education. Now, I would argue, and I'm sure others would too, that college is a little late and not everyone goes to college. So it'd be great if we did more K through 12. We have in the state of Connecticut passed legislation that does require K through 12 sexual assault awareness and prevention education. There's no teeth to that policy, which you understand, but for the viewers, it means no one has to go out and check to make sure it's being taught. So some students might be getting education K through 12, age appropriate, on sexual assault awareness and prevention education. Where we still have a long way to go, and there is a policy being introduced this session, is our criminal justice laws don't recognize the cultural understanding. And so they're all still largely based in force. And so what that means is sexual assault in the first, second, third, and fourth degree really are still framed in what you were mentioning before, like how did you resist? How did you let the individual know you didn't want to go forward with sex? And so what we're trying to do this year is define consent in state statute. It's mentioned in our state statutes, but we've never defined it. And then we would put into sexual assault in the second degree without consent. And so an individual would have to illustrate how they thought they had consent. And if they did not, then that would be a crime.
Yeah, which to me just seems so sad that we have to define that. If
Yes.
someone's drugged up, if someone's under the influence of alcohol, not the girl's fault because she had 2 beers, right?
Yes.
And I can't imagine that fear of just being immobile, right? I mean,
Yes. And you just rattled off all of the examples. Like right now, currently in state law, if someone freezes, that would not make it through the legal system because they didn't resist. But with a change in our law, we'd be able to illustrate that they didn't consent.
right. It's changing it to a consent type. I did love the bill we passed last year on college campuses because in the past, if it was an underage girl and she had a beer or whatever, and they would arrest her and it became all about she was drinking underage instead of the assault. So what was happening was girls weren't, bringing it forth, right?
Yep. Yes, exactly.
I'll be interested to see the statistics, and they also have to survey, right?
Yep. Now every 2 years they have to do a climate survey, which is wonderful.
Which is so important, so
Yeah.
important. Years ago when my daughter was in college, her roommate was raped in their dorm room, and it was really hard. So it'll be good to see that. What advice do you have for people that want to get involved or show support? What can we do?
Sure. So one of the best resources in our state is the Alliance to End Sexual Violence. That's the statewide coalition of sexual assault crisis centers. And so connecting with them, you can also Google and find out what is the local sexual assault crisis center in your area. And you could be certified and volunteer for the hotline or to meet victims at the hospital. That's what I did back in the day, and it's still a service that's in place. But if you get connected to the Alliance to End Sexual Violence and get on their email list, if you're interested in policy, you'll start getting their notifications and you could engage in the legislative process.
Right. So someone asked me recently the question, if someone is convicted of a sexual assault felony, which I assume it means with some violence in it, the felony part, or is sexual assault in general a felony? I'm not sure.
So it varies. There are the sexual assault in the first, second, third, and fourth degree. First degree is with the use of a deadly weapon. So first and second degree are sexual assault. and there has to be, and then third and fourth are sexual contact. So it doesn't have to be penetration.
Right.
And then there's a variety of other pieces. So for example, like a coach. So there's different laws pertaining to dynamics, or if someone is a certain age and someone's a certain age older. And so all of those different pieces fall into our laws. But so all four of those are felonies.
Right. And so they go on the sexual list, right?
So good question. Unfortunately, currently, someone could actually plea off of the sex offender registry. That's another, I mean, you and I have talked about this before. That's another issue that unfortunately we keep talking about and aren't making any changes to. I'd love to see us change that, because right now, the individuals who are listed on that list, there's no way to be able to determine the risk. So I'd love to see our sex offender registry more risk-based. And we do have experts in the state who work with sex offenders. So I think we could get there. Really, that is more of a public push to prioritize that, because as you know, it all comes down to money, and there is quite a bit of money that would be needed to update that system.
Yeah, to do that. Can sexual offenders be pardoned afterwards, after a certain amount of time? Someone told me like after 20 years they could be pardoned and to be off the sexual assault list.
I think as it currently stands, whoever is on the sex offender registry is on the sex offender registry for life. But I could be wrong. That could be individuals. That could be one classification. I think that's a piece of this issue too, of folks wanting to revise the sex offender registry, is that there's no way off of it. And some individuals, the example that's often given, although it does not reflect the majority of people on the sex offender registry, so I want to make that clear, but an example that makes sense, I think, to folks is the 19-year-old that has sex with the 15-year-old. Should that 19-year-old be on the sex offender registry for life? I would still want to see risk, is there a risk to other individuals? But if it was a mistake, no, ideally they'd be able to at some point get taken off of it. So that's right now, I don't believe you can get taken off of it.
So times have changed, because back in when I was in high school, it was very common, and it was the cool thing for a freshman girl to date a high school senior,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So, that is a little bit different. And today's day, it is wrong. So we can't take away that, I remember a case here in town, and I remember telling my boys, and they weren't even 16 yet. And I was saying, don't you ever, really, for kids to be educated and understand that it is wrong no matter what.
Yes.
So what can people do to join that group? Are there other, where can they get more information?
I mean, I think the other thing is for folks to keep sharing, having these discussions, which is important. Believe individuals when they come forward. If someone discloses to you, don't ask those questions like, I mean, I don't know if too many people would be asking what you're wearing these days, but like, well, why did you do this? Or why did you do that? Just, believe the individual and say you're sorry that this happened to them. The other place people can get involved, Jane Doe No More is an organization here in the state of Connecticut. They support survivors who want to share their story. And so they're another wonderful resource if someone is at the point where they do want to speak publicly. Jane Doe No More can help you share your story and help others through that way. But yeah, I think just being supportive and continuing to talk about the issue, because unfortunately, with many issues, we see these media cycles and public attention ebbs and flows.
Right.
And so the Me Too movement certainly was a time where everyone was talking about this, and now it's died down again. And there was quite a backlash to the Me Too movement. People push back that now all these men, anyone who says anything is going to get in trouble. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. We need to continue.
When you have 80 women coming forward though and saying they were,
Yeah.
or with the gymnast, right? With all the gymnasts, when you have that many people, The hardest question I get or in conversations I hear is that they just don't know why people wait.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I totally understand it. And unless you've been through it, you just have to take people's word for it that it is. And like you said, it could have been someone they loved and cared for it, and it became confusing. But as you get older, you learn that was wrong. No wonder I
Yeah.
felt awful going through it. That's not the normal. And the more people I talk with about it, if one person says, well, I've never mentioned it, but,
Mm-hmm.
and they come, they finally are able to talk about it, there'll be someone else in the group that says,
Mm-hmm.
you're not alone, So,
And I
I
think
think we're,
another big piece is, I mean, as we've been talking about the cultural shift and how we understand it, for individuals who were coming of age in a time where that was not the understanding, they were likely fearful they would be shamed and blamed. And so now that there is a more open discussion, I think there's a more comfort to share what had happened.
right.
And so there's a reason you didn't come forward. I just watched over the weekend, just by chance, Bombshell, the story of the Fox News sexual harassment. It's a really good movie if you haven't seen it.
Oh, I gotta write that down.
Yeah, but it's talking about the dynamics too of sexual harassment, which, the continuum, and then can also be sexual assault. And it was in this case. If your career could be ruined. If you disclose, you're then known as that woman who was sexually assaulted. That's a barrier. You don't want that to be what you're known for. You're trying to work on your career or your education. And so that's a
Right.
barrier too. It's like people fear that they're going to get put into this category if they're the one who discloses.
Yeah, I still think we have a long way to go in people accepting and understanding, and that's why that education is so important, that you could ruin your whole career because you came forward, and hopefully that is changing, and people will begin to understand more. But you still hear a lot of, it's better, but we still, again, have a lot way to go.
And that education, I mean, my dream, so I'll keep working on it, is that the education K through 12 for boys and girls on what healthy sexuality and healthy relationships look like. Because I think we fail a lot of children when we don't show them what those dynamics should be, what the positive can be. And if they've only ever seen negative, how can we expect that they're going to know what positive is?
Right. There's a lot of work to be done, but I want to thank you for all your work and knowledge. I know you're the go-to person for me and others when we have questions, and that there are people like you out there working towards, a better world, just in general, with this to protect our children.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
appreciate all you do.
Equally. Any last words?
No, I would just say to folks, if they have experienced sexual assault, know that when you do call the Alliance to End Sexual Violence, it's completely confidential, and they can connect you with an advocate. It's totally free. They're available 24/7, and they can just support you in whatever you want to do.
Right. And that's in whatever you want to do, but it is freeing sometimes to be able to tell someone.
Yes.
You may not want to tell the whole world, but to tell someone. So I want to thank you very much for being on the porch today. It's always a pleasure to have you here, Jillian.
Thank you for the opportunity. Stay warm.
Yes, you too.
Thanks.
I have 2 heaters going here. So thank you everyone for joining us on the porch today with Representative Jillian Gilchrest, and we'll see you next week.